10 Strangest Unsolved Cases Involving Missing Victims. When a notorious serial killer is caught and imprisoned or executed, one cannot help but wonder if all of their crimes were uncovered. Serial killers are manipulative sociopaths, and when put in a position where they have nothing left to lose, they will often enjoy playing games with the authorities. Some will outright refuse to admit to unsolved murders they committed. Others will falsely confess to unsolved murders they had nothing to do with. Here are 10 unsolved cases involving missing or murdered victims, where there is a decent or strong possibility that a famous murderer was responsible. 1. Michaela Garrett. Today, 10:15 a.m., to be precise, marks the 20th anniversary of the kidnapping of 9-year-old Michaela Garrett. The South Hayward girl was last seen being thrown into the back seat of a car, in the parking lot of a market near her family's home. The case remains unsolved. Michaela's mother, Sharon Merck, has since moved to San Leandro, hardened over the years from managing the grief from losing her firstborn, and not knowing exactly what happened to her. Merck said she's been able to come to some sort of normalcy in life. Since the kidnapping, Merck has raised 3 grown children, with a teenager currently attending school in Castro Valley. She also has remarried and has a teenage stepdaughter. "You never know where life is going to take you," Merck said this week. "I certainly never thought on the morning of November 19, 1988, that the day would take me where it did." It was the first day of Thanksgiving break when Michaela and her best friend were riding their scooters. The 2 girls decided to leave Michaela's home on Cornell Avenue in South Hayward and head over to the Rainbow Market, on Mission Boulevard near Lafayette Avenue, to buy soda, candy and other treats. The store is now called the Mexico Supermarket. The girls were on their way home and halfway across the parking lot, when they realized they had forgotten their scooters. But when they returned to the place where they had left them, Michaela's was missing. Reports show the scooter was spotted near a parked car and Michaela went to retrieve it. As she bent over to pick up the scooter, a young, blonde-haired man snatched her from behind and stuffed her into the back seat of a large car. Michaela's friend immediately ran back to the market for help and a clerk subsequently called police to report the kidnapping. The clerk, who thought she had seen the man drive by earlier, offered a wrong description to a police dispatcher, according to Dennis J. Oliver, a former reporter who covered the case for the Daily Review. Oliver, now 45, reviewed 911 tapes during his coverage and recalls the dispatcher relaying a description provided by the store clerk who said, "I seen him earlier." "Never did she say I witnessed the kidnapping," Oliver said during a phone interview Tuesday. The false description that went out to police and the public was a white male in his 30s, with a mustache and driving a burgundy car. But it wasn't until after police interviewed Michaela's friend, that they were able to release a composite sketch of the suspect and a new description of the vehicle 2 days later. "Here's a drawing of this completely different person," and for 2 days the Hayward Police Department allowed media to publish false descriptions of the suspect, Oliver said. "The first opportunity and best opportunity to rescue this girl was immediately after it happened, and for 2 days they were looking for the wrong person. The dispatcher took information from the wrong person, and from there on out communication was just not handled correctly in the crucial first 24 to 48 hours. The new description was of a slender white man with dirty blonde, shoulder-length hair, in his late teens or early 20s, with a pockmarked or pimply complexion, wearing a white t-shirt. His vehicle was described as a large, beat-up, older model car, possibly gold or tan-colored, with 4 doors. Michaela's kidnapping caught national attention and posters with her photo were featured on milk cartons. America's Most Wanted and other television programs aired reports about the case, each one bringing in new calls from people eager to share rumors, speculation and possible clues. There also have been reports that the FBI was able to obtain the suspect's palm print from the scooter. Lieutenant Christine Norrie of the Hayward Police Department refused to comment on the matter, and would not confirm or deny that a palm print had been retrieved. In 1994, the Daily Review reported that police followed up more than 15,000 leads, all to no avail. One of those false leads came from Indiana prison inmate Roger Haggard, who in December 1992, told authorities he helped a friend bury Michaela's body in the Hunters Point area of San Francisco. Officials began to question the validity of Haggard's claim, however, because he changed his account, and even told authorities the child's body was buried in a Union City gladiolus field. "If I knew where to dig, I would," Merck said during a Daily Review interview in 1993. Haggard, who was serving an 11-year prison term at the time, was flown to the Bay Area. After spending 8 hours in the field, he admitted he made up the story because he wanted to give the family peace of mind. His sentence was subsequently lengthened by 6.5 years as a judge ruled the emotional distress to Merck was incalculable. Haggard also was ordered to pay $6,836 in compensation to Merck, who at the time was on stress disability from her job as a secretary. She was later fired. 2 decades later, police continue to investigate the case, with the most recent lead coming in just a few weeks ago, said Ori, who would not release any details because police do not want to compromise the investigation. The case is made difficult to solve for many reasons, not the least of which is the thousands of leads that have come in from so many sources. Ori said, "There are hundreds of registered sex offenders in the area, hundreds of possible suspects. We won't give up. We will continue to investigate leads that come in and continue to hope that we can find Michaela and bring her abductor to justice." Merck said she credits the Hayward Police Department for keeping up the investigation. Today, Merck plans to revisit the area where her daughter was last seen, and flood the streets with flyers and yellow and pink ribbons. "This is my way of keeping Michaela alive," she said. "There's also that chance that if she's alive somewhere, perhaps we can reach her and she can still see that we are looking for her. We still love her, too." Evelyn Hartley. Evelyn was babysitting a 20-month-old girl at the home of La Crosse State College professor Viggo Rasmussen on the evening of October 24, 1953. Rasmussen and his wife, along with many other La Crosse residents, were attending the town homecoming game. The Rasmussen house was located in the 2400 block of Hoeschler Drive. The family had a regular babysitter, but she also planned to attend the homecoming game that night, so Evelyn was hired as a replacement. She brought 4 or 5 school books with her and planned to study while the baby slept. She was supposed to call her parents at 8:30 p.m. to check in, but she never did. Her father tried to call several times that day and never got an answer. He became worried and went to Rasmussen's house to check on his daughter. Evelyn's father found the house's doors locked and the lights and radio on. The baby was unharmed, asleep in her crib, but there was no sign of Evelyn. The furniture inside the living room was disarranged and Evelyn's textbooks were scattered. One of her shoes and her eyeglasses, which were broken, were on the living room floor. Her other shoe was found in the basement. All the windows in the house locked except a basement window in the back of the house. The screen for that window had been taken out and was leaning against the outside wall. A short step ladder was positioned at the window in the basement. It belonged to the Rasmussens and they'd been using it to help paint the basement. 3 other windows had pry marks. There were footprints from a pair of sneakers in the basement window box and in the living room. In addition to the indications of forced entry, was a significant amount of blood of Evelyn's type both inside the home near the basement window, and outside in the yard. There were 2 pools of blood in the yard. One stain was 18 inches in diameter. There was a bloody handprint about 4 feet off the ground on the wall of a garage 100 feet from the Rasmussens' home, and stains on the home of a neighbor's house. Authorities believe Evelyn's abductors carried or dragged her through the yard, and blood pooled twice when the kidnappers stopped and rested her on the ground. Tracker dogs traced Evelyn's scent for 2 blocks, then lost the trail at Cooley Drive northeast of the Rasmussen home. Authorities believe whoever took her put her in a car. One neighbor reported seeing a light-colored car circling the neighborhood at approximately 8 p.m. Another local resident said they heard screams at about 7 p.m., but they assumed it was children playing. Authorities believe Evelyn was abducted around that time. 2 days after her disappearance, a local man named Ed Hofer came forward to say that at about 7:15 p.m. that night, he almost hit a 2-tone green 1941 or 1942 Buick which was speeding westward. He noticed 2 men and a girl inside. One man was driving and the other was in the back seat with the girl, who was slumped forwards with her head leaning against the front seat. Hofer said he'd seen the car's occupants a few minutes earlier, staggering down the street near where the blood was later found. Hofer had assumed the 3 people were en route to the homecoming game. As he was, he didn't realize the significance of what he saw because, at that time, no one knew Evelyn was missing. Hofer's information was publicized, but his name was withheld from the media for nearly 50 years after Evelyn's disappearance. Several days after her disappearance, A pair of underpants and a brassiere that could have been Evelyn's were found near the underpass on Highway 14, 2 miles south of La Crosse. They too were stained with blood. A blood-stained pair of men's pants was found along the same road 4 miles away. It is unknown if the pants are connected to Evelyn's case. A pair of size 11 blood-stained Goodrich sneakers was found in the Coon Valley area southeast of La Crosse. They were apparently dumped there only a short time before they were discovered. The soles had a suction cut pattern very similar to the footprints found near where Evelyn was last seen, and the blood was her type. Investigators believe they were worn by her abductor. Inside one of them was a single human hair, possibly from an African American. Authorities consulted the Goodrich Company and learned that that particular model of shoe was called Hood Mogul and was sold in Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota and Illinois. Based on the pattern of wear on the shoes, investigators believe their owner worked with machinery. The shoes also had a distinctive circular wear pattern on the soles, suggesting that their owner frequently operated a Whizzer motorbike. Investigators determined that 2 different people had worn the shoes. The second wearer's feet were too big for them. Within 800 feet of the shoes was a well-worn, size 36 blue denim jacket with metallic buttons and blood stains on the front, back and sleeves. The jacket had some base metal paint flecks on it. It had been cut off at the bottom and roughly re-hemmed with white thread, and one of the 4 buttons was missing. There was a worn mark running the entire width of the jacket under the armpits, possibly from a safety harness. There were bast fibers, like the kind used in scrubbing brushes, in the left-hand pocket. The blood on the jacket was Evelyn's type, and blood smears found at the house she was taken from were made by cloth with the characteristics of denim. Authorities believe the jacket was worn by her kidnapper. However, it appeared to be too small for a person big enough to wear size 11 shoes. One investigator concluded, based on the pattern of wear on the jacket and the way it was cut off, that whoever owned it worked as a steeplejack. Evelyn's kidnapping sparked one of the biggest searches in Wisconsin history. Among other extreme measures, investigators conducted mass searches of local vehicles and gave lie detector tests to all the students and teachers at Evelyn's school. They took the shoes and the jacket to 31 different communities in the area and displayed them to an estimated 10,000 people, but no one recognized them. Many suspects were questioned over the years, but there was no evidence to implicate anyone. Some people suspect Edward Theodore Gain may have been involved in Evelyn's case. A photograph of him is posted below this case summary. He was visiting relatives in La Crosse, just blocks from the home where she was babysitting, on the night of her disappearance. In 1957, police went to question Gain about the disappearance of a local barmaid and found human remains all over his house. He had killed 2 women and had dug up other women's bodies in the cemetery and mutilated them. Gain was declared insane and died in a mental institution in 1984. No trace of Evelyn was found on his property and he denied any involvement in her case. He has still not been completely cleared, however, and is also being considered in the 1947 disappearance of Georgia Weckler. Evelyn was a junior at Central High School at the time of her apparent abduction. She had a straight A average and was involved in many school activities. She also played the piano and sang in the choir at the First Presbyterian Church. She had had few dates with boys and had never had a steady boyfriend. She is the youngest of 4 children. One of her older brothers died of polio several years prior to her disappearance. Evelyn's parents are now deceased. One of her siblings lives in Oregon and the other in Australia. Her case remains unsolved. 3. Ronald Hughes. Donald Shorty Shea, a hand at the Spahn Ranch in Chatsworth, where the Manson family lived for a time, would be killed later and his body concealed on the ranch for years. He was the last victim whose murder yielded a conviction. An additional death that some have considered suspicious occurred during the Manson murder trials. Ronald Hughes, a 35-year-old attorney, had been hired by Manson as part of his defense team for the family. But in court, he ended up strongly defending Van Houten, who was also on trial for murder, and his defense of Van Houten seemed to come at the expense of Manson. In late November 1970, as the trial neared its end, Hughes disappeared. 4 months later, his body turned up wedged in a rocky creek in Ventura County. In his bestseller Helter Skelter and in later interviews, Los Angeles County Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi suggested that Hughes had been killed at the behest of Manson. In an interview with a TV reporter several years ago, Bugliosi said one member of the Manson family described Hughes as the first of the retaliation murders. Kay said he was on the fence about whether Hughes was a victim of Manson's group, but he added that the cult leader was plainly angry at Hughes. The last thing Manson said to him was, "I don't want to see you in the courtroom again," Kay said, and he was never seen again alive. But Charlie Rudd, an 83-year-old retired Ventura County Sheriff's Sergeant, said Hughes' death probably had nothing to do with Manson. When Hughes disappeared, Rudd was assigned the investigation. The Ventura County Sheriff's Department heard a rumor that Hughes had been taken to the Barker Ranch, but no evidence was found there. Hughes' body was found near Sespe Hot Springs in the Los Padres National Forest, and Rudd said there was little evidence of foul play. Rudd believes Hughes had gone camping and got caught in a powerful rainstorm that nearly stranded other people. The creek swelled dangerously and Hughes died either because he drowned or because he was battered to death by debris and rocks. Rudd says he was hit by some debris or lost consciousness and drowned and drifted down the river quite a ways. Rudd said there was nothing else to indicate otherwise and the medical examiner couldn't come to a conclusion of anything other than that. 3 years before Hughes disappeared, Rudd met Manson after he had been arrested in Ventura County on a minor offense. It was there that Manson appeared in possibly his most iconic mugshot, his eyes as wild as his hair. Rudd, a court officer at the time, said he chatted amiably with Manson about his harem of women and his way of life. There was little hint of a Pied Piper who would lead his followers to murder. As time has passed, Rudd said he's not surprised that many still believe the Manson family's ledger of victims was longer. Those people were capable of a lot of things, he said. Simon Wells, author of the Charles Manson biography Coming Down Fast, said he has long suspected that the Manson family was responsible for the November 1969 slaying of John Haut in Venice. Authorities concluded that Haut died accidentally while playing Russian roulette with a revolver. Wells has investigated the case and found that Manson family members were present when the shooting occurred. Watson is serving a life sentence in prison for killing Tate and 4 others at her Hollywood Hills home. Detectives had until now not been able to get the tapes, but Watson's attorney died in 2009. And the law firm filed for bankruptcy. Watson's decision to sell the tapes to a co-author of his 1978 book Will You Die For Me, the man who killed for Charles Manson tells his own story, waived his attorney-client privilege, the LAPD argued in court. With the judge's ruling, detectives could get the tapes in 2 weeks, barring a legal challenge by Watson. 4. Zachary Ramsey. Zachary departed from the apartment he shared with his mother in the 400 block of North 4th Street in Great Falls, Montana at approximately 7:30 a.m. on February 6, 1996. He was walking to Whittier School at the time. Witnesses saw him walk down the alley near the 400 block of North 5th Street shortly thereafter. He never arrived at school. Zachary ran away once, a month prior to his disappearance, but called his mother to come get him within an hour. He lived with his mother and 2 siblings at the time of his disappearance. A neighbor reported that Nathaniel Barjona was in the area of the alley around the same time Zachary was. A photo of Barjona is posted below this case summary. Another witness told authorities that he saw Zachary crossing North 6th Street at approximately 7:45 a.m. The witness stated that Zachary appeared to be crying and was being followed by a man, who was apparently upset. Investigators believe that the man was Barjona and that he abducted Zachary by using a stun gun to subdue the child shortly thereafter. School officials contacted Zachary's mother when he failed to report for classes during the day. His mother filed a missing persons report later that afternoon. Zachary has never been heard from again. Barjona was charged with Zachary's abduction and murder in 2000. Authorities suspected Barjona, whose given name was David P. Brown, preyed on young children, mainly boys. Barjona also confessed to cannibalistic activities. He bragged that he hunted Zachary. Among other grisly claims, he had a lengthy criminal record and served a prison sentence for the abduction and attempted murder of 2 Massachusetts boys in 1977. Authorities stated Zachary's body would not be recovered due to Barjona's suspected cannibalism. Prosecutors sought the death penalty for his alleged crimes. Barjona was convicted of 2 unrelated counts of child molestation in Montana in February 2002. He vowed to appeal the decisions and maintained his innocence in all charges against him. Barjona is also a possible suspect in the 1973 Disappearance of Janice Pocket from Connecticut. Barjona was a teenager at the time Pocket disappeared, but apparently had a criminal background at an early age. He also resided near Janice's last known location at the time she disappeared. Authorities also investigated the possibility that Barjona was connected to the 1997 Wyoming disappearance of Amanda Gallion. Amanda is classified as a runaway, but her social security number has not been used since her disappearance. A handwritten list of names entitled Lake Webster was discovered in Barjona's possession in December 2001. Some reports state that Andrew Amato was among the children featured in the list, but this is inaccurate. Andrew disappeared from Webster, Massachusetts in 1978. He has not been tied with Barjona. DNA testing conducted in 2001 on a bone located in Barjona's Montana garage proved that it was not part of Zachary's, Janice's or Amanda's remains. Andrew's DNA was not compared to the bone. Barjona was not charged in connection with any of the other disappearances. He died of a blood clot in a Montana prison in April 2008, at age 51. All charges related to Zachary's case were dismissed against Barjona in October 2002, as the result of a lack of evidence. Zachary's mother stated that she believed her son was alive. She said that she viewed a videotape of her son frolicking in a playground in 2000. Authorities said that they verified the tape was filmed in Italy, where the child's father was stationed with the United States military at the time. His dental records and fingerprints did not match Zachary's. His mother insists that her psychic and others believe her son is alive and she hopes his case will be reopened by law enforcement. Investigators closed Zachary's file after allegedly connecting Barjona to his disappearance. In January 2011, over the objections of his mother, Zachary's biological father had him declared legally dead. He can now collect on Zachary's $20,000 life insurance policy. Zachary likes drawing and painting. He is described as a reserved but friendly child. At the time of his disappearance, he was afraid of the dark. His case remains unsolved. 5. Kimberly King. Kimberly spent the night of September 15, 1979, at a friend's residence across the street from her grandparents' home in Warren, Michigan. At 11 p.m., she called her sister and said she had sneaked out of her friend's home and was calling from an outdoor phone booth not far away. Her sister told her to go back inside. Kimberly never returned to her friend's home, however, and has never been heard from again. Authorities are uncertain what payphone Kimberly was calling her sister from. She said it was a short walk from her grandparents' home, but one witness said he saw her using the phone several miles away. Her case was originally classified as a possible runaway. There are few clues as to Kimberly's whereabouts, but her case is classified as a non-family abduction with probable foul play involved in her disappearance. Investigators learned that Kimberly may have traveled to Grand Rapids, Michigan after her disappearance, but the leads did not pan out. Although one of Kimberly's sisters had run away from home several times and Kimberly herself was known to occasionally stay out until late at night, she does not have a history of runaway behavior and authorities no longer believe she left of her own accord. Authorities theorize that Kimberly may have been a victim of a serial killer of children in Oakland County, Michigan. The killer, nicknamed the babysitter because he bathed and fed the children prior to their deaths, is believed to be responsible for the abductions and homicides of 2 boys and 2 girls around King's age in 1976 and 1977. The children were all held captive for several days before being slain. No one has ever been charged in connection with any of the murders. If Kimberly was a victim of the killer, her case is atypical. In the other cases, the victims' bodies were left out in plain view by roadways and were found fairly quickly, but Kimberly's remains have never been located. David Norberg was considered a suspect in the case for many years. He was employed in Warren at the time of Kimberly's 1979 disappearance, and lived just 2 streets away from her home. He was killed in an automobile accident near Recluse, Wyoming in 1981. After his death, jewelry allegedly belonging to several of the Oakland County child victims was found among his belongings. Norberg was never charged in connection with any of Kimberly's disappearance or any of the murders. However, Norberg's body was exhumed in September 1999, and his DNA was compared to a single strand of unidentified hair discovered on the final murder victim, Timothy King, no relation to Kimberly. In November 2002, authorities announced that Norberg's DNA did not match the hair found on Timothy, but that they were not ruling him out entirely as a suspect. He fits the serial killer's profile very well, and there is circumstantial evidence linking him to the murders. Investigators still think he might have been involved in Kimberly's apparent abduction if not the murders. The Oakland County serial killer has never been identified, but one male victim's family sued a suspect, Ted Lamborghini, for his wrongful death in 2007. It is not clear whether Kimberly was a victim of the same person who killed the others. Kimberly's grandmother died in 1995. Prior to her death, she purchased a cemetery plot for her granddaughter. Kimberly's two sisters still hope she may be located. Her case remains unsolved. 6. Colleen Osborne. On March 19, 1984, 15-year-old Colleen Osborne left her Daytona Beach home to go to school. However, because the city was at the height of its spring break season, she decided to skip school to go to the beach instead. Unfortunately, she never returned home and was reported missing. 3 weeks later, the decomposing body of an unidentified Jane Doe was discovered in a shallow grave in Orange County. Colleen's family speculated that the body might be hers, but the medical examiner ruled this out. However, the family remained skeptical about this ruling and would eventually ask for DNA testing to be performed on the remains. After 26 years, it was positively confirmed that the Jane Doe was Colleen Osborne. Colleen is believed to have been a victim of serial killer Christopher Wilder. He was nicknamed the Beauty Queen Killer because he liked to target models and attractive young women and was known for luring his victims by pretending to be a photographer for a modeling agency. Wilder went on a killing spree in early 1984, abducting and raping at least 12 women and murdering 8. Wilder started off his spree in Florida and traveled through several states before he was killed in a shootout with police in New Hampshire on April 13. Wilder just happened to be staying at a motel in Daytona Beach on the day Colleen Osborne disappeared, so he is the prime suspect in her death. However, since Wilder was killed before he could provide any answers, no one will ever know for sure. Florida authorities are appealing to an anonymous, letter-writing confessed killer to give them enough information to solve the mystery of a Florida teen missing for almost 2 decades. Time may be running out because the unknown letter-writing suspect claims to be dying of cirrhosis. Colleen Emily Osborne disappeared 17 years ago. Osborne's brother received an unsigned, handwritten letter filled with misspellings and postmarked February 21 in Manchester, New Hampshire. "I killed your beloved Colleen nearly 15 years ago. For that, I can only beg your forgiveness. I can only attempt to make amends by disclosing to you where her innocent little body is," the letter said. The author described an area along the Tamaki River off Route 415 in Daytona Beach where the girl's body and clothes could be found. He said he put her clothes in a black trash bag about 100 feet from the body. "We're assuming right now that everything in the letter is true, and the person who wrote it did what he, or she, said," Stephen White, the lead investigator with the Volusia County Sheriff's Department, told CNN. But, White said, the information was so vague it was hard to find a starting point or a good reference location to find Osborne's body. He said the area is thick with brush and that without more precise information the search would go on forever without any results. The family appreciates the efforts made. However, they're just not complete enough. "We need a specific location to recover their sister," he said in an appeal to the letter writer. For years, Osborne's family believed she was the victim of Christopher Wilder, an Australian who traveled across the United States in the spring of 1984 raping, torturing and murdering more than 10 female victims. He died in April that year in a shootout with New Hampshire state troopers. Osborne, then 15, was last seen in the bedroom of her Daytona Beach home on March 19, 1984. Wilder was seen in Daytona earlier that day. The family and authorities are treating the letter writer as the killer. The family, with the help of the Volusia County Sheriff Department, has drafted a response to the anonymous letter, hoping the person will respond. "We're just acting as if it is a true lead, and we're going to treat it as a homicide until we know differently," White said. Asked if it could be a hoax, he said, "It's always a possibility, but until we confirm that it's a hoax, we're treating it as real." 7. Darren Glass. Darren's parents are both deceased and he was a ward of the state in 1980. He was living with a foster mother, Fannie Mae Smith, and 3 other children in the 2200 block of Memorial Drive Southeast in Atlanta, Georgia. He had lived with her for less than 3 months before her disappeared on September 14. On the day of his disappearance, Darren went downtown to watch a baseball game, then returned home at 4 p.m. He left the house again after only a few minutes, and Smith assumed he had gone out to play. Shortly afterwards, Smith got an emergency phone call from someone claiming to be Darren, but the caller hung up before she was able to speak to him and he never called back. Darren has never been heard from again. Investigators believe Darren may have been a victim of the Atlanta child killer, the nickname for a serial killer thought to be responsible for the deaths of over a score of African American children, teens and young adults, mostly boys from poor families, in Atlanta in the early 1980s. The listed victims' ages ranged from 7 to 28 and they were killed in a variety of ways. Some were missing for months before their remains were found, but of all the presumed victims, only Darren has never been located. Wayne Bertram Williams, a music promoter and freelance photographer, was convicted of murdering 2 of the oldest listed Atlanta victims in 1982. He maintains his innocence in all of the cases. The presiding judge at his trial allowed prosecutors to bring in evidence linking Williams to the other victims. After his conviction, the police closed the files on the 22 other deaths, concluding that Williams had killed those victims as well. A photograph of Williams is posted below this case summary. It is worth considering, however, that there are doubts about Williams's guilt and many suspect the Atlanta child killer was actually several serial killers operating independently of one another, or even the Ku Klux Klan. One of the police officers on the task force that arrested Williams stated he did not believe Williams had ever killed anyone at all. Nonetheless, Williams remains in prison and all of his appeals have been rejected. The investigation into 5 of the Atlanta child murders was reopened in 2005. But it was closed again in 2006 without any new indictments being handed down or new evidence being uncovered. Smith described Darren as an immature but streetwise child who had many friends. It's unclear whether he had a history as a runaway. Some accounts maintain he was a habitual runaway, and others say he had never run away from home. Smith stated he stayed close to home and often brought his friends over. He had lived in another foster home for about a year before moving in with Smith. One of Darren's foster brothers claimed he knew Darren's whereabouts and got calls from him until as late as November 1980, but this was never verified. His status as a victim of the Atlanta child killer is tenuous. He was listed only because he fit the profile. Darren's case has never been closed. He remains missing and foul play is suspected in his case due to the circumstances involved. 8. The Dubbs family, Harvey and his wife, Deborah Dubbs, lived with their young son, Sean, in San Francisco, California in 1984. Harvey was selling video equipment in July of that year and placed an advertisement in a local newspaper. Deborah was speaking on the telephone to a friend on July 25, when the doorbell rang at their family's apartment. Deborah told her friend that she had to end the conversation, as 2 men who were interested in the items had arrived at their home. Harvey, Deborah and Sean have never been heard from again. One of the Dubbs family's neighbors saw an Asian man leave their residence with a box later in the day. The same neighbor observed an unidentified vehicle drive away from the Dubbs' apartment on July 26, the day after the family disappeared. The neighbor attempted to follow the car, but she lost the vehicle in traffic. A man identifying himself as Jim Bright called Harvey's employer shortly afterwards, and claimed that the family moved to Washington. The unidentified man terminated the conversation when Harvey's employer became suspicious. Authorities believe that the Dubbs family were victims of serial killers Charles Chitat, occasionally spelled Chat, and Leonard Lake. Photos of Eng and Lake are posted below this case summary. The men reportedly met through an advertisement in a survivalist magazine in the early 1980s. Lake was a former United States Marine and a Vietnam War veteran. Eng was a citizen of Hong Kong and falsified American citizenship documents in order to enlist in the Marines. Eng was charged with stealing weapons from the military in 1982 and was apprehended on Lake's property in California later that year. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison and should have been deported to Hong Kong after completing his sentence, but a bureaucratic error allowed Eng to remain in the United States. Eng was released in 1984, and moved on to Lake's ranch in Wilseyville, California. Lake was a survivalist and the residence was stocked with weapons. explosives and provisions. Eng and Lake began using the ranch as a veritable sex slave compound shortly thereafter. Authorities believe that the men found their victims at random. As in the case of the Dubs family, the female victims were often videotaped and forced to perform sexual acts for Eng and Lake prior to their murders. The male victims and children were usually tortured before their deaths. Investigators apprehended Lake after he and Eng were caught shoplifting from a San Francisco hardware store in 1985. Eng fled from officers, but Lake was taken into custody. The men were driving a vehicle owned by a missing person, who was later determined to have been one of their victims. A pistol and a silencer were discovered inside the car. Lake swallowed a cyanide capsule he taped to the collar of his shirt while in custody. He reportedly told authorities that Eng was his partner prior to his death several days later. Investigators searched Lake's property and uncovered the remains of several victims. Many of the bodies had been dismembered and burned, making identifications of the victims difficult or impossible. Eng was apprehended in Canada later in 1985. He was convicted of 11 murders in California in 1999, after 14 years of legal wrangling and stalling. Eng's trial was one of the most expensive in California history. He claimed Lake was the actual murderer and has never accepted responsibility for the murders. A receipt in Harvey Dubs's name was discovered at Lake's compound, but the family's remains have never been recovered. It is believed that the Dubs were forcibly abducted from their home and murdered at the ranch. Eng and Lake are also believed to be responsible for the 1985 disappearances of Jeffrey Gerald, Paul Costner and Clifford Parenta. All of them vanished from San Francisco and have never been located. 9. Cheri Jo Bates. Cheri Jo Bates was a student at Riverside Community College, RCC, and was brutally murdered on October 30, 1966. Her dream was to be a flight attendant and travel the world. She had attempted to obtain a flight attendant position out of high school and was rejected. She attended RCC in the hopes of improving her chances on the next round of hiring. Cheri Jo was from Riverside and lived with her father, Joseph Bates. She was dating her high school sweetheart, Dennis Highland, and they were engaged to be married. Dennis was attending San Francisco State on a football scholarship at the time of her murder, about 400 miles away, or a 6-hour drive. She had a part-time job as a bank teller, mainly to pay for her lime green Volkswagen, which she was especially proud of. Note that I linked to a magazine article on her murder, but I also pulled from FBI and local police reports, and other sources. I cite to the magazine article because it is one source that is pretty comprehensive. The article has a salacious 1960s cover page, but the story itself has good content. I know a lot of researchers are passionate about the Zodiac case. If my post contains any inaccuracies or there is other additional information, please note so in the comments. Cheri Jo's case always gets lumped in with the Zodiac killer discussion when it is far from clear that the Zodiac is the perpetrator. I think she should get attention on her own. Cheri Jo attended the Sunday, October 30th morning church service with her father. Her father went to the beach after church and Cheri Jo stayed home to work on a paper on the Electoral College. Her father returned home late in the afternoon to see a note on the refrigerator reading "Dad went to RCC library." A neighbor recalled seeing her lime green Volkswagen parked at her house at 4:45 p.m. Cheri Jo was seen by a friend waiting for the library to open at 5:40 p.m., which gives a rough timeline of when she left. Police believe she ate a roast beef sandwich shortly before leaving home. The library didn't open until 6 o'clock. A friend reported waiting with her for it to open. That is one of only 2 reported sightings of Cheri Jo after she left her home. A librarian reported seeing at the library but could not recall what time. Friends at the library at 6:40 did not report seeing her. At 6:30 the next morning, Cheri Jo's body was discovered by a campus groundskeeper near Encina Drive on the campus, slightly west of the library annex. A campus map can be found here: www.rcc.edu/about/parking/pages/campusmap.asks. The crime scene was west of Building 1, and you can see the student parking lot off to the left side of the map. Cheri Jo's remains were found on a side street of Terracina Drive, which led from the library to a student parking area. The injuries inflicted were horrific. The autopsy recounted 26 different injuries to her body. At the scene was a men's Timex watch, spattered with dried paint. The police determined the watch was sold at an overseas military base. The watch was set to 9:07 p.m. The person wearing the watch had a 7-inch circumference wrist. Footprints left at the scene corresponded to a size 8 wing Walker shoe, popular shoe with military. Also clutched in Sherry Joe's fingers were 4 strands of a Caucasian male's hair. A DNA sample was eventually recovered from the hair. Police have stated they believe the hair may be unrelated to the crime, but that was in reference to a suspect which the hair cleared. A woman who lived near the murder scene recounted hearing 2 loud screams at around 10 o'clock to 10:30 p.m., followed by a car starting. This is complicated by daylight savings time. Some people argue that this witness may be mistaken based on DST, that she hadn't wound her clocks back and it really was 9 o'clock to 9:30. The coroner made several findings of note. Sherry Joe had ate her last meal of a roast beef sandwich between 2 and 4 hours prior to her death. Police believe she ate at around 5 p.m., so this would place time of death at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And the time of death, based on rigor and body temperature, was initially placed at 9 to 12 hours prior to the autopsy, that is prior to 9 o'clock a.m., so 9 o'clock to midnight, and later revised to approximately 10:30 based on rigor and body temperature. The murder weapon was a 3 1/2 x 1 1/2 inch pocket knife. There was no sign of sexual assault. Police found Sherry Joe's Volkswagen approximately 200 feet west of her body, parked on Terracina Drive. The windows had been rolled down and the keys left in the ignition. The middle distributor wire had been disconnected, so her car would not start. Some reports have additional wires being pulled. There were greasy hand and fingerprints on the door. Police brought everyone who had been in the library that night back to the library for a reenactment of the night of the 30th. A total of around 83 people showed up. All males there volunteered hair samples and fingerprints. None matched. One man was missing. Multiple people recounted seeing a heavy-set bearded man at the library that night and he wasn't at the reenactment. Several people also recounted parking next to a light-colored 1947 to 1952 Studebaker sedan in the library parking lot, yet it had not returned for the reenactment. Nobody reported seeing Sherry Joe in the library that night, save one librarian who couldn't recall when. There was also an older woman who was in the library that night who didn't show. 10. Anne Marie Burr. Anne Marie was last seen in her home in the 3000 block of North 14th Street in Tacoma, Washington on August 31, 1961. She shared her bedroom with her 3-year-old sister, who had a broken arm at the time. In the middle of the night, Anne Marie brought her sister to their parents' room because the younger girl's cast was bothering her and she was crying. Their parents told them to go back to bed. Anne Marie has never been heard from again. Anne Marie's mother got up at 5:30 a.m. and discovered her daughter was missing. The front door had been locked and chained the evening before, but Anne Marie's mother found it unlocked from the inside and open. There was a small living room window they had kept open a few inches, and in the morning it was found opened wider, with a piece of red thread stuck in the jamb. A garden bench had been taken from behind the house and put in front of the window. A faint footprint was found outside the open window. It had been distorted by the previous night's heavy rainstorm, but authorities believe it was from a kid's sneaker, size 6 or 7. A small man or a teenager would have feet that size. A similar footprint was found in the back of the house by the basement window. There was no sign of Anne Marie anywhere and no sign of a struggle in her bedroom. Her sister and her 2 brothers who slept in the basement had not been disturbed, but the family's dog had barked that night. Anne Marie's parents had heard it and assumed it was scared of the storm. Neighbors reported that in the days prior to Anne Marie's disappearance, they had seen someone in their yard, peering into their windows, but they couldn't describe the person. Anne Marie's disappearance was treated as an abduction from the beginning. Authorities theorized that she was possibly taken by someone she knew. They investigated convicted sex offenders living in the neighborhood, but could link no one to her disappearance. One man made a ransom threat, but he turned out to be an opportunist who had nothing to do with Anne Marie's disappearance, and was charged with disorderly conduct. A teenage boy who was a neighbor of the Anne Marie family failed a polygraph about the case. He passed the second test, but the police never ruled him out as a suspect. An extensive search of Tacoma turned up no clues as to Anne Marie's whereabouts. Various suspects surfaced over the years and several people claimed to be her abductor, but none of the stories could be verified. The case grew cold and remained so until the serial killer Theodore Robert Ted Bundy came into the spotlight in the 1970s. A photograph of Bundy is posted below this case summary. He was convicted of several murders and is suspected in scores more, including in the disappearances of Nancy Baird, Lynette Culver, Julie Cunningham, Susan Curtis, Georgian Hawkins, Vicki Holler, Rita Jolly, Deborah Kent, Donna Manson, Denise Oliverson, and Nancy Wilcox. He was executed in Florida in 1989. Bundy lived only a few blocks from Anne Marie's home at the time of her disappearance, and he apparently knew her, though accounts differ as to how well they were acquainted. He was only 14 years old when she disappeared and was not considered a suspect in his case, until his killings came to light over 15 years later. It is worth noting that Bundy confessed to many murders he had not been charged with. He always denied involvement in Anne Marie's presumed abduction. Nonetheless, many people believe she was his first victim. Anne Marie was about to begin the 3rd grade at Grant Elementary School when she vanished, and she had studied piano for 2 years. She was raised to be independent and, beginning in kindergarten, walked several blocks to school alone every day. Her parents stated she was intelligent, artistically talented and an obedient daughter who didn't cause any problems at home. Anne Marie's parents adopted another daughter a few years after her disappearance. Her father died in 2003, and her mother in 2008, but all 4 of her siblings are still alive. Her case remains unsolved.